The second group of OTAs is complete, and there's action going on in the field. Who's stepping up and who's making some noise today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. The second trio of practices is done at Chiefs OTAs, and there are some people emerging making a little bit of noise. We're going to have to go over them and tell you what you need to know today. But first, thanks for making this your first listen. We appreciate you checking out another Locked On show for your next listen. Maybe somebody that's going to be on the Chiefs schedule. That's probably a good idea. Always good to hear interdivision. So check those out because we're free every day on every platform, everywhere, starting on YouTube and echoing out through every platform you can find. You can find us on Apple and Spotify and all the audio platforms as well, where everything comes down. We appreciate your time. And for you everydayers, I know you can listen in a number of different ways. We appreciate you being here every single day. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, as well as NFL33.com and RGR Football.
And I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. And when you start looking at what is going on at OTAs, there are a couple of stories that are coming out. And I'll leave it up to you as to which direction you want to go first, offense or defense.
Let's get offensive. Because I'm tired of your – oh, no, not that kind of offensive. They're doing some fun things out there.
They are doing some fun things, and Kansas City is playing into the hype that has been going on since last offseason when Kansas City brought in Justin Ross to this roster. And they put out a picture, or they put out a video of Justin Ross catching a deep ball from Patrick Mahomes. And – I know people were joking about it, but Ted Wynn is one of those guys that I follow that I really like, and he joked about saying, the Chiefs don't even need DeAndre Hopkins with that video.
And that's the reaction. It's not just guys who know better like Ted. It's the reaction of the fan base across the board. It's even the reaction to me like, hey, it'd been a quiet first trio of practices last week for Justin Ross. Knew he was out there, but didn't hear much, didn't see much. And then all of a sudden you get some kind of spark play. And if I remember well, it's not a starting DB that he was, competing against on that particular rep.
Pretty sure it was Najee Johnson.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a height difference there and all the other things that you can roll into that. Yes, we admit that, folks. But a lot of folks are excited about Justin. And I have to give him credit. He's come back and he looks nimble. What we've seen of his training seems to have progressed just since he popped back up, less than 2 months ago. So that progression just in itself, I find satisfying, and I find it encouraging for what he may be able to bring. That's one step forward, getting out here in OTAs, and this happens every OTAs. If you guys remember Darwin Thompson, Chiefs Kingdom lost their mind for Darwin in OTAs, and how did that end up? But
guys in shorts,
right? Grain of salt. The thing that I liked about what we see from Justin Ross, and we saw another couple of catches out on Thursday as well, is that he's in there and he's getting reps with Mahomes, and that's what matters. We know he was down in Dallas at TCU practicing as well. So there's clearly a connection that's at least been had the foundation laid. If he can push, that should be an advantage.
Yeah, and Patrick's been talking about him. I mean, they've had questions. And Patrick's talked about the connection he has with Ross and what he sees from him so far. So we'll see if that's able to translate. And obviously, this is exactly what you want to hear if you're a Justin Ross fan. You want to hear that he's doing well at OTAs. You want to see things that happen on the field that make you think that he has a chance of making this roster. This is exactly the position you want him to be in. We will see whether or not it's going to translate into what we hope it can translate to in training camp. That's a long way away. But he's doing the right things right now, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and it's just another step down the road towards fulfilling his potential, which is enormous. And as we've talked about since this time last year, well, actually training camp last year, when he did have to go on IR, it's always about the health for Justin Ross. Like, we know he has the talent and the ability to be able to show it consistently. Now, this is just second trio of practices in the off season. There's a lot yet coming. They're off until next week. Was it the 7th they begin again? So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? And then there's mandatory minicamp coming. And that's, there's a couple of chances for evolution there as well before we even get to training camp. So let's cross our fingers that this is just another step forward and it continues.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other guys. Jordan Schultz, I think, on the Score wrote an article about two guys or the top 10 wide receivers he thinks is going to take a big step forward in 2023. Two Chiefs made that list: Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. He thinks both of them are going to have big years, and we've seen Sky Moore catch a couple of balls in OTA. Sorry. We've seen Kadarius Toney do a couple of things in OTAs. We've seen things from different wide receivers. MBS has had some good times at OTAs as well. That's all positive. That's all going to help the offense. And there's a lot to be excited about. This is the time when the offense really should have a little bit easier of a time than the defense will.
Agreed. I will say this too. I think they're going to be very popular picks this preseason for guys that are going to step forward, because what's the lasting image that you have of last season? It is Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore completely uncovered by the Philadelphia secondary, waltzing into the end zone. And I think that's a fair sign. But I just want to throw up the one thing. Hey, Andy schemed them open as well. There were tendencies that they exploited. Let's see what they do once the competition starts. I'm all for the 7-on-7 and doing well.
Yeah, but that shows you exactly what Andy Reid and his coaching staff are capable of. That's the exciting thing, is that was something that the Philadelphia Eagles struggled against during the year. They saw it in film study, and they were able to take advantage of it. I'm not saying that that's going to be a play that's going to score a lot of touchdowns for the Chiefs this year, but it shows that he has the ability to look at things and say, oh, wait a second, this defense is doing this. I can overload it and make them do what they shouldn't do, and get wide open players and get wide open easy touchdowns or wide open huge gains. If you do that at a different part of the field, it's a huge gain. It's at least a 15, 20-yard gain regardless of where they catch the ball. So, there's a lot of different things that they could do. And Andy Reid is always somebody that I enjoy seeing what he brings to the table in new offensive schemes when the season starts.
And I think they might get away with doing that a few times, especially if we're going to see as much double and triple tight end formations as we're hoping. That could be the key forward. But somebody's going to have to defend them in a secondary somewhere. It's not going to be the Chiefs secondary, but there is noise going on out at camp right now for the secondary for the Chiefs. But before we get there, make your fast break to FanDuel right now for the NBA playoffs. I know you didn't think it was going to be this matchup, but it is. You might as well get in on the action. And right now, they're giving new customers a no-sweat first bet for up to $2,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. So get in there, make your play. If you lose, you can earn up to that much in bonus bets applied to your account that you can then go try again. Lot to go on there. There's no better place than FanDuel right now, America's #1 sportsbook. You can get in the action really, really easy. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's right here underneath me. And get a no-sweat first bet by signing up. You can get up to $2,500 in bonus bets applied to your account. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon right down below here. It's at FanDuel, America's sportsbook betting partner of the NBA, the MLB, and the NFL. So Steve Spagnuolo came out, and I love the assistant days. I'm all for seeing Andy talk, and shout out to our guy Matt Derrick. If you guys missed the show earlier this week, he's on Wednesdays. You can always catch him. Go back and check that one on. I know you everydayers, you locos already got it, but Andy had some nice words to shout out to Matt. Matt's been working on his health, dropping some lbs, and he did, and Andy shouted him out there. So if you want to get a little bit of insight, or you want to get some info in a different way, you can sign up for our new text program. It's 816-357-8781. Text us there, and you can get in on the action as well. But aside from Andy giving compliments out to our pals, it's assistant day, and I love those days because I feel like at the end of the day, you get more information from what's really going on or what perception really is. And I always tune into Spags first. And I think there's a number of small things that he called out that really do make sense. L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie have been pretty calm, not participating in a ton here the first couple of practices. He called out Trent McDuffie in particular. Come mandatory minicamp, they should be back. They are still considered the starters. It's not a question. That's fine. But what that's doing is giving a lot of reps to younger guys. And I think the number one takeaway has to be that, to quote Steve Spagnuolo, that the rookie group from last year that are now second-year players are, quote-unquote, light years ahead of where they were last season. As you would expect, because they should have been nowhere as rookies, but just the fact that they're settling down, that's really, really encouraging for a team that just comes off a championship.
Yeah, and what's that say for where they could be this at the end of this season? I mean, you look at what they were able to do last year, and don't get me wrong, I understand that there is some growth during the season that he's taking into account in that statement. But that's exciting to hear. I mean, you had this great rookie crop of DBs. You had 5 of them that came into the roster and competed and helped you win a Super Bowl. And you're saying that all 5 of them are light years ahead of where they were last year. And what was the one thing we kept talking about with Joshua Williams? He has to learn the body control. He has to learn the NFL game. He has to get to that point. This is when you're going to start to see, I think, him take another step forward in his progression, because I do think that he's going to play a bigger role in Kansas City's defense than maybe some people are thinking, just because he gives them a different body type that they don't have otherwise.
Yeah, and that comes along. It's the length. It's the explosiveness. Yes, you have to train. You have to be able to recognize. And I think there's instincts that you can grow, particularly with Josh Williams. I think Jalen Watson has them, and he's displayed them already. But you can hone that a little bit more with Josh. I think you can try to really work on the anticipation from Watson as well. And if you get those many reps from those guys, and they've been running with the ones, as has Najee Johnson in at the nickel. Nickel's a great position we'll talk about here after this next break, because the nickel's going to be a scenario-driven concept this year. But to have all of those guys coming in ahead of where they were, that's a resounding plus. The other big thing for me, observation number 2, Steve Spagnuolo really went out of his way to talk about how Brian Cook's made the transition to being the starting safety next to Justin Reed. Did give Justin some props as well. We'll talk about that in a second. But this was always the thing. The only reason you could let Juan Thornhill go is if you had a replacement in-house. You didn't want to put a rookie in there. That was never the intention. And I think what Steve really, elaborated on that maybe we didn't get to hear and see last year was that Brian was becoming more vocal, getting into that role, being able to become, contribute to the leadership of that group as a rookie. And now it's just a clean transition into being that starter that's out there with Reed, the guy who's, got the ton of experience. He and L'Jarius Sneed are the elder statesmen in this group. But that bodes well for what they're going to be able to do, particularly in split safeties, but what Brian Cook's going to be able to communicate down to everyone else in the secondary.
No, I agree with you, and I think that that's going to play a huge part in what he's able to do this season for the Kansas City Chiefs, and how really this entire secondary is going to play. And just to go back really quick on the corners, the one thing that I like about about Joshua Williams, is think about who they have in Los Angeles right now. Think about who the Chargers have as their wide receivers. You're going to need all that length. You're going to need all that height. That is something that you're going to need in this division, and it goes beyond just the division, but specifically in this division with Mike Williams and the kid from TCU in Los Angeles with the Chargers right now. So now you're in a situation where, you have Brian Cook coming in as being the starter instead of Juan Thornhill. Now, you saw instincts kick in at times last year, making some plays last year. He also had some bad plays last year. He also had a couple of penalties that I guarantee you he wishes he could have back. But those are the times when you need him to come in and have those types of scenarios. And it's good he had him last year, because you have to learn from him. You have to learn what you're capable of. You have to learn how to be disciplined in the NFL, because the Chiefs will not put up with that type of continual penalty.
Yeah, agreed. And even as a fan of him pre-draft, I do have to recognize that you gotta lock that down a little bit better now that you're the starter. You're the guy that's got to make the plays. And I do think that he's capable of that. I have confidence in that. And I'm really intrigued to see where the evolution of his play goes, especially if he can get into that groove with Reed. It is better to have a safety tandem than it is to have, a true center fielder and a guy that doesn't play close enough to him. You can double up. You can get some other things done when you have that ability. And getting things done is what they're going to have to do. And at the nickel, how is this going to work? Who can make some impact here? Because L'Jarius Sneed isn't practicing right now. That's giving opportunity to a whole slew of people, and guys are taking advantage of it right now to try to make a mark. What does it look like by the time they get to the regular season? We'll talk about that right next. Right next is my favorite phrase that I use only when I'm camping. Yeah. Sometimes you just
Right
have to get to
next.
the next thing when you get next to it. So that's how
Yeah.
it goes.
There you go.
Clearly, L'Jarius Sneed has the contract thing. He's the best player in this secondary. I think we're all aware of that. His not playing is opening up, I think, a little bit of question because Najee Johnson's getting a lot of reps. Nick Jones had a pick the other day. Even Brian Cook dropped down and came up with a pick 2 practices ago, I think it was. And now you get some information about how they're going about it philosophically. In that, Spags, the big breakdown that I can give you guys is that Spags feels that L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie can both play in the nickel. He's comfortable with them there. I do think that Trent has ways to go to catch up on being inside, but he's capable. Is he elite yet? No, but I think he has that upside. But it is also clear that from Steve Spagnuolo's point of view, he's comfortable with the backups in Watson and Williams on the outside. Clearly, he's got some new guys in the fold. They're going to see how they evolve. But he made it clear, we're going to use those guys where we need to use them until there's a viable option not to. And so that's where Nick Jones and Najee Johnson are getting reps. Even Shamar Connor's getting some reps. He had a takeaway here on Thursday. Lot of options there. If someone can emerge and take those nickel duties, it allows McDuffie and LJ to stay outside. And that's what I think Steve's trying to set up, that if we can go there, we will. But until we can, we're not going to push it. And I think that's the right way to do it.
Well, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but the other thing that it really gives you is, when we start talking about the defensive line, one of the things we talk about with the defensive line is how versatile they can be. It's another thing that we talk about when it comes to the offensive line. How versatile can those players be? How many different positions can they lock down? How many different ways can you have them on the field and have them be effective? And it looks like they're kind of looking that direction, trying to figure out what they can do in the secondary in that same regard. It's a matter of, okay, you have these guys that can play outside. Do they have the ability to play inside? And yeah, nobody's going to be L'Jarius Sneed when it's playing on the inside, but can they be close? Does it give you the ability to feel like, depending on the matchup, that maybe you can have this guy come in and start and be okay and have Sneed outside on a number 1 wide receiver, or maybe locking down the number 2 like the Patriots used to do specifically and taking away the number 2 wide receiver. So having the ability to have guys play multiple positions in the DB room, in the safety room, in the cornerback room, in the safety room, that's going to help a lot defensively. It gives you a way to scheme things up, and it also gives you the ability to not let the offense know what's coming when you bring certain players in.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think it's interesting that Steve is focusing on the secondary, a group that we know was already pretty well fortified, rather than some of the other positions. Hope to get more information on the defensive front here next week for you guys, and we'll definitely be back with that. But it's the evolution of the group. It doesn't have to be X guy is X here. I would love to see L'Jarius Sneed be able to travel and stomp on the number 1 with safety help over the top. I don't know if Spags and Cullen are going to decide to do that, and I am starting to call them by a duo here in the coaching hierarchy. But I think what it allows you is that interchangeability. And I think that's probably something when you look at a team last year that for all of our bluster and happiness with their performance, they still ended up, middle of the road in terms of pass defense. I think they gave it the most touchdowns in the league in passing.
And a lot of that probably takes into account early season woes, because they struggled a lot more earlier in the season than they did late.
Yeah.
And averages are what they are. So, you're not going to be able to beat that average easily sometimes. So part of that is early season woes, but I still think that what you saw late in the season was more than adequate and probably even above average at times across the board when it came to the secondary play. And those guys knew what they were doing. They were focused. They knew where they were supposed to be. They were in position, and it took great plays by the quarterback or the wide receiver to beat them.
Very true. If you push that quarterback to that limit, you're doing your job. You're going to give up some plays. There's no way around it.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you get to the playoffs and you're going up against, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, those types of guys, they're going to make plays. There's nothing that has driven me more crazy than watching guys in the past in the Chiefs uniform being in the exact position they're supposed to be at, be doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and getting beat and just hearing people just wail on them for getting beat. Can't do anything sometimes. The guys on the other side of the field are getting paid a lot of money to beat you. Sometimes they just have a better, not necessarily a better scheme, better athletes, better positional, whatever. There's lots of different things. And you got to realize all these players, if they're where they're supposed to be, they're doing what they're supposed to do. Most of the time, that's going to work out to your benefit.
Yeah, you have to think so. And I'm intrigued to see how it evolves. Again, this is OTAs. There's another trio of practices next week. There is mandatory minicamp. That is coming as well. Then we get into training camp, and that's where the real evolution happens. We saw Josh Williams make a good push last year, fall back a little bit in training camp, then come back on during the season. There's a lot of ups and downs, but it's encouraging to see so much positive comment from the coaches early. So, again, if you want some of the inside information, make sure you text us at 816-357-8781. Get in on the action. I'm really intrigued as to what's going next, but next week we're going to get into some different topics as the OTA shift till later in the week. What are we going over on Monday?
On Monday, I think we're going to be looking at, what we have seen so far, and is this team a team that can get back to the Super Bowl in 2023 or 2024? I mean, you want to call it however you want to call that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the expectation, right? There's no way around that. A lot of other teams right now are talking about, hey, can we make the playoffs? Can we win our division? That's not what this team's going to look at. We're talking Super Bowl, how and why they can repeat. How do they get back there next week on Monday? So don't miss that show. It's just one of 5 shows you'll hear next week, because we are 5 days a week, every week, all the time, no matter what. You everydayers know that. You locals, we appreciate you. And for all of you who are new to us, make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell. And click over on Spotify and Apple in order to get subscribed there so you don't miss any of them, because we're covering this team 360 all the time from every angle that we can find. We'll have more for you then. Enjoy your weekend, Chris. I'm going to try and enjoy mine as well.
Thank you very much, and we will talk to you next week.